Well, hello everyone. Happy Father's Day. Glad that you can join us however you're doing so today. When I was 17 years old, my dad let me borrow his truck to deliver a package for the company that I was working with at the time. Now, my dad's truck was red, shiny, and he washed it twice a week. It was very, very important to him. I drove with a coworker into the city, and I was young and unfamiliar with where I was going. As I moved into a left-hand turning lane on Lower Peach Street, my coworker suddenly blurted out, "No, it's a right." In my impulsive and immature driving abilities, I quickly hit the gas and turned the wheel to the right, causing an accident with a car that was driving down the center lane. The damage to both vehicles was extensive. My dad's truck was still drivable, but the other vehicle had to be towed. Unfortunately, no one was hurt. I parked the wrecked truck in the garage, and when my dad came home that night, I explained what happened. I took him in the garage, and I didn't know what to expect from him. I had wrecked his truck. He walked around and was very silent. When he did speak, he asked me, "Are you okay?" I told him yes, and that no one was hurt. He was quiet again. And then he said, "I'm glad that no one was hurt. Cars can be repaired and replaced, but people cannot." That was about all he said. He didn't drag it on. He didn't try to teach me a lesson. He didn't carry on in an angry way for days after that. He knew that I was hurting, and he extended something much more valuable than his shiny truck to me: grace. He gave me undeserved favor, something that every dad and person, for that matter, has the power to give. It's something that God gives us every day in a lavish way. And we're going to talk about that today by looking at a familiar story that is not only appropriate for Father's Day, but for every day. And this story is not only great for dads, but just about anyone. In chapter 15 of Luke's Gospel, Jesus tells three stories about something that is lost and found: a lost sheep, a lost coin, and a lost son. And he does this in response to the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law who had been critical of him spending time with tax collectors and notorious sinners. These self-righteous leaders complained about Jesus, and Jesus shares these three stories with them to make a point. We're going to focus on story number 3 today, the prodigal son. Now, first, remember that Jesus would tell parables to cause the listener to listen a bit more closely and think about what they were hearing. These stories were not only informative, they were also somewhat entertaining. They could move the listener to a place of identifying with one or more of the characters in the story. They might find a character that they think that they are like. A third characteristic of a parable is that they are usually open-ended. There's not a solid conclusion, like telling the story and then at the end of it saying, "So that is why you should eat an apple every day." No, the listener is left to make their own conclusion, and often each listener comes to their own personal revelation in that process. And so, as we look at this parable, my hope is that you will insert yourself in the story, decide who perhaps you're most like. Maybe you'll think about whom you would like to be more like, and also perhaps let this story stick with you far after this day and continue to gain some important truth from it. If that happens, I would say that this parable will have done its job. Now, this story can be divided up into 3 parts. The first part is about the son, the second about the father, and the third about the brother. Here's part number 1, Luke chapter 15. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now before you die." So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.'" Here is what we realize about the son. He is blinded by selfishness and therefore is not considerate of his father. He is on a mission, and his mission is to get what he believes is his and to go find happiness elsewhere. Now, if you've had a child who is a teenager and nearing college age, you will easily relate to this. First, children, teens, and young adults can be very selfish, self-centered, and unaware of people around them. Second, as God's children, we all can be the same way at any given moment, regardless of our age. We all have been there as teenagers and young adults. We want to become independent and live our lives without someone telling us what to do. And sometimes our actions betray us. But we are young and immature, and we do and say stupid things. Beyond those years, as God's children, we will often try escaping beyond the boundaries of God's best for us, and we immerse ourselves into disobedience and sin. We become prodigal. This son tells his dad what he wants, and he takes the money, and he spends it all, every cent. He is prodigal. It is important that we clarify that word. Most will say that the word prodigal refers to the leaving and returning home repentant, sometimes after a failed experience. But it actually means this: spending lavishly, to be recklessly extravagant, to have no limits, and to have no regard for costs. This son was prodigal. He spent his inheritance lavishly. This son wanted to take the money and run. He gave no consideration of his father, but only himself. His actions even implied that his father would be better off dead than alive. The son leaves, spends it all, and then returns. In his pain and suffering, he remembers the fairness of his father. He returns and repents. Verse 21. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son." But his father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and is now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found." So the party began. This is a picture of a kind and selfless father. It is not always easy to be that way, especially if you did not have this kind of father to learn from. I recently watched a documentary about the 1980 Olympic hockey team. Many of the players reflected on their coach, Herb Brooks, and how tough he was. They said that he had a lot to prove. When the U.S. team went to the Olympics in 1960, Herb Brooks had a chance to be a player on that team. The coach at that time had to cut one player from the team the day before the Olympics. Herb was that player. That 1960 team went on to beat the Soviets. In an interview, Brooks said that he remembers watching that 1960 gold medal game against the Soviets. He was in the living room with his family. The U.S. scored and won the game. He said that his dad looked at him and said, "I guess they cut the right guy." Herb Brooks was devastated. In a moment that called for compassion, he was crushed. I think about all of the right things that could have been said and done in that moment, but they were not. As a result, hurt and pain was transmitted and would never go away. Hurt people hurt people. We have it in our power to exercise words and ways of grace and mercy to people around us. How different would we be to people around us if we measured our words by asking this question: will this help or will it hurt? If in doubt, leave it out. The father in our story today, he exercised lavish and extravagant love and selflessness for his son, even in the midst of his son's missteps and failures. He was a prodigal father. Just as the son was lavish in his spending, so the father was lavish in his mercy and his grace toward his son. Dads, listen, this is a goal to aspire to. Be a prodigal father. It says that the dad was filled with love and compassion. The opposite of that is anger and contempt. If there is something that you as a father are waiting to be apologized for from one of your kids, be the adult and just go and love your kid and you apologize to them. Anger and contempt will always keep a broken relationship broken. Love and compassion will always be the healing agent. Giving grace is always the better path to take. This is what God offers us every day. There are many fathers in life, both good and bad, but God the Father is the best father. He is exemplified by the father in this story. He has enough love and compassion to go around and expects nothing in return. Here's the third part of this parable. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. "Well, your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return." The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, "All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf." His father said to him, "Look, dear son, you've always stayed by me and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found." Well, you have to feel for this brother, right? He did it the right way. He appears to be very compliant, obedient, hardworking and was probably really good at following the rules. However, that can be a real trap. That produced in him a self-righteousness and a moral superiority in comparison to his brother. He's a lot like the Pharisees and the religious leaders, stubborn, self-righteous. The Father is filled with love and he forgives. The Son is filled with stubbornness and judgment. He refuses to align with his Father and forgive the brother. In fact, he will not even call him brother or even enter the house that he is in. Instead of exercising grace, he wastes it. He, too, is a prodigal. He is so fixated on his brother and what he thinks the father should or should not do for the brother that he fails to see his father's great provision every single day for him. This should cause each of us to ask this question: am I missing out on the enjoyment of what God is giving me every day because of my judgment toward what I think he should not be giving to others? Both sons are flawed. Both are prodigal. But throughout the story, the Father is the steady, dependable voice of wisdom and demonstrator of undeserved favor, grace. We begin to get a clear picture of the Father from the start. The Son has a pretty big and almost outrageous demand. The Father complies. The Son takes the money and runs, and the Father stands by and watches and waits. And now the Son returns, and not only does the Father receive him, but he's been waiting and watching. He doesn't wait for the Son to ring the doorbell. The Father runs to meet him. And when he reaches him, he hears the Son ask for forgiveness. The Father does things that will confirm to the Son that he is still his Son. He embraces him and kisses him. He calls the servants to serve the Son, not the opposite. They clothe him and put shoes on his feet, which signifies a place in life and a family that is better than being a servant. And he plans a party to celebrate the Son's repentance and return. And then in a similar way, the Father also then goes to the older brother who refuses to enter the house even after the Father begs him. He pleads with this brother to remember what he has all along, a steady stream of help and a wealth that is always available. And then the final verse is a priceless takeaway of the mindset of this Father and more so of God the Father in heaven. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and now he is found. It goes back to another line found earlier in this chapter. There is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. 3 prodigals, a son, a brother, and a father. One is lavish in his desire to leave and spend what he believes is his. The other is lavish in his stubbornness and refusal to receive what his Father is offering him every day. And the Father is lavish in offering everything to those whom he loves, even though they may not fully understand it and certainly don't deserve it. If you've experienced a child leaving, you know the pain of waiting. If you've experienced someone returning, you know the joy of that moment. If your story has ended differently and maybe you just continue to wait, we must remember that while we wait, God works and watches over us with grace and compassion. You know, the end of this story is open. There is no closure, but instead an opportunity. For Jesus, the teller of this story, he provides an opportunity to the self-righteous religious leaders to begin to judge their own actions and make a decision to be more like the Father in the parable, loving, compassionate, and forgiving. And to the others listening, perhaps there's a need for repentance, to know that even if you feel as though you have spent it all and deserve nothing but pig food, you have a Father in heaven who is unlike any other, and he waits for you. And as he is waiting, he is watching and hoping that you will return. And he will provide for you acceptance and not judgment, no matter what you have done and who you may be. Remember, the judgment of man is inequitable and condemning, but the forgiveness of God the Father through Jesus Christ, the Son, provides hope and a future.